This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Emily, host of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come and check out my show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk about nerdy theories, games, TV shows, books, movies, you name it. We're here to talk nerdy to you. A new show comes out every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to How to Write Good. I'm your host, Daniel Poppy. Find out more about me at danielpoppy.com or just listen to other episodes of this podcast. If you do enjoy this podcast, check it out on Facebook, like and share. And this podcast is brought to you by Public House Media. So this week, we do not have a word of the week or a logical fallacy, and I know that that is your favorite the favorite aspect of the show. We actually have another guest. This week we have on Seth McGathey. We are going to be talking about logic and debate and different things related to that, and just have a little bit of a discussion about that. And as I stated in the past, for me, this is a really important thing. I think that this is going to be a very good conversation and get a different perspective on it, because I think that oftentimes when you listen to this show, you just get my perspective. So without further ado, let me introduce Seth McGathey to you. All right, Seth, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we are going to jump into talking about logic and debate and critical thinking in general. But Seth, can you give us your overview, what you think about that? Like, what is your viewpoint? What are these things when you hear them? Or let's just talk about one at a time, I guess, or however you want to go about it.
Okay. Well, I guess for me, debate has just always been something I've been drawn to, even before I really understood what I was doing. And I don't even remember what it was. Have you ever heard of the Myers-Briggs personality types?
Yeah.
So I actually, in the last couple of years, took that, and I forget what my actual, letters or whatever were, but the nickname for my personality type was actually called the debater.
What is your personality type? Do you remember?
I don't remember really.
Okay.
No, but all I remember that stuck out to me was that I was nicknamed the debater. Okay. And like the personality just fit me really well, where it even described what I always have sort of argued for as what debate really is supposed to be about, and that it's not about being right or wrong. It's more about the journey and finding truth.
Okay.
And so I guess that's really, I think, why I like debate, is because I like learning. I like, finding out new things that I didn't know before. And debate allows you to do that in a lot of different fields: science, philosophy, religion, pretty much anything you can think of. Debate can tie a lot of those things into each other and let you learn, not just from other people, but with other people, which I think is just sort of an amazing thing.
Okay. So talking about debate, so I have my own ideas about this, but I want your ideas without my input, like you having to bounce off of my ideas. So with debate, okay, so when you debate someone else, how can you arrive at any certainty with debate? Like, what's the foundation you're working off of with that you can say, oh, we're debating and these are the rules, or anything? Like, how does that work, or where do you come from and when you're trying to debate? What system do you use?
Honestly, I think it sort of changes depending on who you're talking to.
Okay.
For example, I actually am in the middle of a Facebook debate right now, with a guy who is just off the wall, like literally might be somewhat insane. He's basically trying to argue that history we know of Europe, Asia, all of that is completely fabricated,
Yeah.
and that really all of that happened in the Americas,
Yeah.
and that then it was like, so then black people existed on all of the rest of the world, and then white people basically conquered it all and switched history so that it was in Europe and Asia rather than in the Americas.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I am just absolutely loving debating him about
Yeah.
it, because what I've been doing is I have almost never made a counter argument or a point throughout the entire debate. Instead, I've sort of gone with the Socratic method of I just keep asking him questions,
Yeah.
because I know no matter what I say, he's going to either say it's part of the conspiracy, or I don't understand, or something. So debating him, there's no point in making an argument, because he's never going to listen.
Yeah.
You've got to make him argue against himself.
Yeah. Okay. Can you give like an example of something he says and then what you do like when you're talking to him? So using the Socratic method, like an actual example of something that happened or an idea that he presented and how you responded to it.
Well, for example, he made the argument, I said before, he claimed that the Americas were where all of European and Asian history happened.
Yeah.
And then he said that his version of Christopher Columbus, who was also a black man, was sent by the black Spanish monarchy to convert the white people of America to their religion. And then said that, like a little bit later, said that that when Christopher Columbus landed, that they conquered the black Native Americans.
Okay.
And so right away, all I had to do was to make him start backtracking on his own beliefs, was to bring up, well, I thought that white people lived in America and black people, lived in Europe and Asia.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it wasn't even like an elaborate question to respond.
Yeah.
It was just a simple, here's something you stated. Here's something else you also stated.
Yeah.
They don't seem to logically merge. Explain yourself, basically.
Yeah, he sounds crazy. I'm sorry. Like that guy
absolutely
sounds nuts. But yeah, I mean, it kind of goes like you're just pointing out contradictions then at that point. And that kind of goes with the idea of like logic, and then you're trying to avoid logical fallacies, which is interesting that he has his ideas are insane, but he still follows at least some. I mean, he probably doesn't follow logic very well, but he follows at least he shouldn't contradict himself, or he can, or does he even see that? But okay, that's really bizarre. So
it really is.
have you gotten anywhere with the guy with debating? Has he has his mind changed? Have any ideas of his changed at all?
I don't think yet, and I mean, honestly, at the level of insanity that some of his ideas are, I don't know if he ever will. But like I said, I sort of sometimes just debate for the love of debating.
Yeah.
And I also believe that the second you go into a debate trying to prove something to someone, you've already sort of lost the meaning of debate, and now you're just in an argument.
Yeah.
And I see no value in that. So I think at the very least, I'm taking this debate as sort of a intellectual, fan fiction.
Yeah.
That I'm learning what he believes, and I'm going to learn a bunch of interesting, made up beliefs. And maybe if I'm lucky, he'll reconsider his beliefs, but that's really not my end goal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because like you were saying before, your end goal of debate, because you differentiate between debate and argument, and I wouldn't like when I talk about that, I don't necessarily differentiate, because I see arguments as like I see arguments from more of a logical argumentation thing rather than fighting, you know. So when I think of argument, I think of that rather than some people just going at it. So with you, when you talk about debate, as you said before, it's like more of you're trying to seek truth and you're trying to ask questions about things and explore different ideas, and that's essentially what you're doing with this guy, it sounds like. Or you're trying to get him to explore his own ideas. So, okay. With that, I mean, how often do you actually see people who actually are willing to debate or actually have sound thinking skills?
Well, I would sort of say those are two different things.
Okay. Can you explain that?
Well, I think, like, I think I'm pretty good at drawing people into debates. Mm-hmm. Not even on purpose, just, again, because of my personality. I hear someone say something that's contradictory to what I believe or is just intriguing to me. Yeah. And I instinctively say or do something to make them elaborate or to try and ask them to reconsider what their belief or what they just stated because I see a problem with it. Mm-hmm. And so that, like I said, I think I'm very good at drawing people into debate. So I find most people are willing to debate. The question is, are they willing to debate civilly, which is not always true. But something I learned, and to be fair, for one, I'm not always a civil debater. I think almost anyone is easily drawn into a non-civil debate or an uncivil debate because you know, if it's something you believe strongly in, it's easy to get your emotions going and you lose focus, and it really does take focus and mental abilities to be able to keep the emotions out of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I actually used to be absolutely terrible about it. I used to be the type of person that, to me, a debate was, shove my beliefs down someone's throat and get them to believe what I believe. Mm-hmm. But one of the best things I read was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. And that's when I first started to really reconsider that and realize that debate isn't about that. It's about learning. And yeah, it just hit me at a really good time in my life when I took it to heart and really started to try and improve the way I thought about, conversing with people.
Yeah. Well, does debating people, like, so you say that a lot of people you draw a lot of people into debates just because of your personality, essentially. So do you actually get along with people better, like, because you debate them from a more civil perspective rather than what you did before? Or is it just like, do people actually enjoy debating?
I wouldn't say that just like everyone enjoys it. I think some, like, I definitely have friends that anytime we're together, we're basically just debating stuff, even on just the stupidest things, like, whether Harry Potter did whatever, mm-hmm. or is capable of doing something, just silly stuff like that. But I think I've learned that when you debate civilly and you debate well civilly, that it actually allows people who normally don't want to debate because mm-hmm. Because in their mind, debate is, an ugly, offensive thing where you're just attacking each other. But when you do it civilly, it becomes a conversation. Mm-hmm. And so then it just becomes an intellectual conversation. And I think a lot of people are very open to just having, interesting conversations with people rather than just having, a meaningless, how's the weather, how's your day kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I think, I think that might be why it's easier to. Well, this is what I noticed. So I think that if you're talking about things that don't really matter, so if you're talking about a movie, like you mentioned Harry Potter, or anything like that, people are more willing to debate. From my perspective, like, people don't get, like, they don't get defensive about it. But if you bring mm-hmm. something up that is they hold like they really something they believe strongly, they're more likely to get defensive about it from my perspective. And I think that you really do need to use tact when you talk to someone who, like, you just use tact around specific types of topics, especially because I think, like, if you yell at somebody, if somebody's like, oh, well, Harry Potter can do this, and then you yell at them about it, and even if it kind of becomes absurd, because if you're yelling at them about that, it's likely that you're just yelling for the sake of yelling, just for the fun of it, and they're likely to go back and forth, and they're probably not going to get offended. But if it's something that they believe strongly, it's going to be a little different. But one thought I had while you were thinking about that is that one thing I've been thinking about in my, like, for the past few years is, and since I got married, is like the idea of conflict in your life, and that, like, conflict with other people is something that really grows you as a person. And I think debate, it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. And I don't think conflict ever has to be a negative thing. But if you come up against somebody in a debate who has a completely different idea than you, you can really learn a lot from that person just because of the fact that you're coming into conflict and you're both willing to talk about the thing in a very civil way, and you have, like, a baseline understanding of how to go about thinking about it, and you can kind of go back to a logical paradigm and be like, all right, we're trying not to contradict ourselves. We want everything to make logical sense, and if I don't make logical sense, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm wrong, but, like, I want that other person to point it out for me, because you have a relationship developed where you actually can do that. So
exactly, and I think especially that last part is a really big point, that I think it's important for people to realize that if you lose a debate, it does not mean you were wrong.
Yeah.
It means that they out-debated you. And that's a huge distinction in my opinion, because people, I actually never went through any formal debate training or anything. Everything I do is with debate is completely taught on my own. But I feel that, or I know that in actual, like, debate competitions and things, a lot of times you are forced to actually debate for things that you don't necessarily believe in. You're given a topic and given a side that you have to defend, whether you believe it or not. And to me, I think that's something that I wish I had gone through, and I think everyone should go through, to learn that the best way to know your argument is to try and defend your opponent's argument to the best of your ability, because then you know where the real holes are, and that's when you really start learning what the strengths and weaknesses of your own debate are. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, a few years back, my dad was actually talking about that, and he was talking about how when he was in school, he had a teacher, and the teacher always he's like, okay, we're going to be talking about specific things, and you're always going to be doing the thing that you don't actually believe, because it just gets you thinking. And I don't know, like, in the current, I think that, so in our current, like, culture in the U.S., I think that there's loud people who are essentially, like, stuck in their camp, and they're not willing to listen to other people. I don't really think it's everybody. I think most people are willing to listen to other people, but I think there's, like, you see a lot of that, and I think it's just something that's so valuable now, because you need it. But I had a thought, now I can't remember it. I thought that something about what you said before, and I just, it's gone, but...
That's right. Well, because actually what you were just saying just made me think of something that I'm actually... So I come from a pretty conservative background, but I have, in my time of learning more about debate and I've studied sort of on my own economics, and I'm really into Milton Friedman, who is an awesome debater. And through that, I've sort of moved more libertarian than conservative, but still somewhat conservative. And I'm in some Facebook groups that are, really hardcore conservative people. Yeah. And I find myself, I find it interesting because a lot of my friends on Facebook are actually more liberal, or at least the ones I debate with usually are. And it's funny because I find myself, I am sort of middle because I'm libertarian, but when I'm in those conservative groups, I find myself feeling liberal, and a lot of times they'll get mad at me and call me liberal. And then when I'm debating, liberals, they'll call me a conservative and, all the names that they have for that. And so it's really funny that when you start debating people, even regardless of what you believe, they automatically will sort of like force a certain viewpoint on you.
Yeah.
Because, especially in politics, I feel that in America we're so polarized that people assume if you're on one side or the other, then you believe everything that side is known for.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that, like, why? Okay, so I kind of have I've had the same experience myself. Not even in relation to politics, but just other things in general, where you have someone who they think something really strongly, and then you're kind of like, that person, or there's a group of people who think something really strongly, and then you kind of question it, and then they really don't like it. And I don't know, why do you think people actually do that? Like, why is it the case that we just, like, I don't know, why don't we want to? Because it's a better, in my opinion, it's a better life if you're open. Like, if you're open to new ideas, and you're not necessarily taking every idea that comes your way, but you're willing to talk about ideas, and you're willing to actually allow your own ideas to be questioned. Like in my own life, I found that it's super valuable. I've got a friend, and he's one of my only friends. He's really smart, and he's one of my only friends who, if I say something that doesn't make sense, he'll be like, well, he'll just point it out. He'll be like, oh, that doesn't make sense, and this is why it doesn't make sense. And it's always really valuable to me. So I guess, like, when I was younger, like, it makes more sense because maybe you're, like, scared of stuff. But as I get older, I don't know why more people don't adopt an attitude of being like, well, I'm willing to just not know everything about what I think I know about. I don't know if that was right, if that was correct grammar, but
that's all right. I feel like a lot of it comes down to comfort zones.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like, I think most people realize, but the human brain just puts things into categories.
Yep.
And so when you categorize stuff, sometimes you're wrong, and that's fine. But to admit you're wrong is the important thing. And so, I mean, I do it all the time, where I will meet someone, and within the first 3 seconds, I go, I don't like this guy, or, there's something about him that I'm like, oh, he's cocky, or, oh, this or that. But I've always tried to pride myself on the idea that I will make a snap judgment on you when I meet you, but I'm always open to you convincing me I'm wrong. And I think that that's a scary thing, because to a lot of people, because you're thinking like, well, my instincts aren't right then, or, my logic was wrong, and it's made, like, once you start questioning one thing that you believed, you start sort of unraveling a cloth, and it's like, where does it end? How many things have I been wrong on? Can I trust anything I believe? Things like that. But I think once you start actually allowing yourself to do that, that's when, the cloth actually, you find out where the strong points in your cloth are, and you start to acknowledge that you never would have wanted to hold on to those loose parts anyways.
Yeah. And
because they weren't true.
Yeah. And even if they are true, you want, like, okay, so yeah. And the things that you're saying, like the parts that are stronger, so you're like, oh, these are actually true. Like the parts that maybe you don't have a reason for believing at first, it doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. Like you were saying before, it might mean that you actually have to do some thinking about them. Because I mean, I think that for myself, like something really valuable has been like, okay, like I've got a lot of beliefs. going back, where do I start with these beliefs? All right, this is what I can say with a lot of certainty that I think is really the case, and then you build off of it. And then even if you have doubts later, you can always go back to that thinking and be like, no, there's a reason why I actually think this way, as opposed to just saying it. I don't just believe it out of thin air. I actually have a reason for believing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that comes into that is because you also, because especially with like social media and stuff, we sort of get put in these little echo chambers that once you're in the echo chamber, if you start to, question something and you make it vocal to other people in that echo chamber, you're going to get blasted. And so it's almost like a shock collar, like on your thoughts. It's saying, don't shift in and out of this, container of thought, or you're going to be attacked by all your friends and loved ones that you formerly, felt a connection with, like intellectually, and that's a scary thing.
Yeah, especially and I know there's, like you said, and social media really is an echo chamber, because what I think that, and it was like last year, I think, or the year, actually, it probably was about 3 years ago, when you're seeing there were articles about social media, and it was talking about how the algorithms, how it chooses, you like something, and because you agree with it, you like it, and then it starts feeding you more and more stuff, and then you create this bubble around yourself. So you should just get rid of your Facebook. Really, yeah, that's what should happen. Everybody just abandon all social media. No, it's okay. It's all right. I don't like it, but whatever. It's all right. It's not a necessary evil. It's just something that is convenient in a lot of ways. So,
yeah. Well, and I think there is the ability to make it not like that. So like I said, I'm in some conservative Facebook groups, specifically because I can openly debate with those people.
Yeah.
Or not even debate, but just have talks about conservative ideals without the liberal presence. So that's sort of an echo chamber that I've allowed myself into. Yeah. But then on my actual Facebook page, like I said, I have a lot of liberal friends, or some just friends that don't really know where they lie in the spectrum. And so they're sort of separate. And so I'm very proud of, the diversity of the people I talk to on Facebook, because a lot of times we get into really good discussions about a wide variety of topics, and most, it's not right down the line. It's not just everyone jumping in and saying the same thing. It's people conflicting and discussing and, comparing ideas. And so in a way, I think you can turn the whole echo chamber on its head and turn it into the exact opposite, and allow social media to get you in contact with people that you normally wouldn't get to have those discussions with.
Yeah, and you have to be conscious. You have to make a conscious effort to actually not make it into an echo chamber. One thing I was thinking about, I think it's important to I think it's important when you're talking to people, talk to a lot of different people and talk to people who disagree with you. And I think that what you were saying, there's certain times when you're talking to people who maybe think similarly to you, because sometimes when you're debating, if you don't have a premise that you're working off of and you both agree, you're going to go in a completely different direction than if you do, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
If I'm talking to someone who is who thinks that if you're talking politics, if you're talking about someone who thinks protectionism is really good, and they're basing like the premise they're talking about, like their paradigm of economics is for the state is protectionism, and then yours is like laissez-faire. You're going to be talking about something completely different than if you're talking about someone who has like a laissez-faire view of economics. Or the state's involvement in it, which is I think both are good, but in some cases, like it's kind of the idea if you debate God with someone. So if you believe in God and the other person doesn't, then that's going to be a completely different thing than if you both do, because you're both starting at the same place and be like, all right, we agree on this, and let's continue to talk about that. Because if an atheist is debating someone who like a deist, the atheist is going to be like, why should I even debate God? It's pointless to do this because God doesn't exist, because they've already made the assumption that God doesn't exist, whereas the deist already made the assumption that God has. So
exactly. Well, and I know again, like I said, I don't have a classic education in debate, but I know one of the big things that people bring up for debate is that you have to define your terms, and because if you don't have an understanding of each other's terms for anything with having to do with the debate, you're not debating on the same level. You're essentially having two separate debates, and you're going to keep talking over each other's heads. And I think that's another reason why it's so important to be able to take some time and think about the argument from your opponent's side. Because, for example, a big hot button issue is, the whole abortion topic. And you really, like, if you think about it from both sides, there is logic. Like, neither side is illogical in their beliefs. It's a question of your understanding of the world. If the fetus is a human being, then defending it at all costs is logical, because you're saying I'm protecting a human life. If the fetus is not a human being, then there is no logic behind trying to defend it. And at that point, protecting the human being that is involved, which would be the mother, is a logical conclusion to come to. And so both sides like to throw, you're a baby killer, or
which is a logical fallacy.
Yeah, exactly. You're a baby killer, or you're a woman hater, or those are just ad hominem, and neither side actually believes what you're throwing at that side, because you're not defining your terms in the same way. You're not taking the time to say, okay, they don't actually want to kill babies. They don't think it's a baby. Yeah. And they're not actually trying to control women's beliefs. They're trying to save an infant's life.
Yeah.
And I think if you just take that time to understand both sides, you probably still won't change your mind.
Yeah.
I don't think either side would change their mind on that, but you can discuss it civilly, and again, maybe not even come to an agreement on what should be done, but you at least can do it. You can at least start making compromises and understanding that maybe you can't get the perfect situation that you want, but you can get a better situation than what we have now.
Yeah. And like, if you are defining things completely different, you can't have a regular argument. You have to have an argument about how the thing is defined when you do that. So you actually have to be like, all right, so what is this thing actually, and figure that out. All right, so we're a little over time. So before we go, could you, if there's anything you'd want to say to the audience that about debate that you think is really important for people to know before you go, I'll give you the floor to be able to do that.
I don't know if there's anything to add to what I've said as far as my own beliefs, but I would say anyone who enjoys debate or really wants to have a better understanding of good debate should check out the podcast Intelligence Squared or Intelligence Squared US. Both of them are Oxford style debate, so there's no fighting, there's no, they take turns. It's very organized, and it's really cool because they actually poll the audience at the beginning and then poll them again at the end. And so the winner is decided by how many minds were changed. And so, one side could have started with, 5% of the audience and ended with 6%. But if the other side, had 95% and went down to 94%, they lost because they didn't change any minds. They just or didn't even keep all the ones that they had. And it's such a wide variety of topics that it's almost impossible not to find something you'd find interesting, and it's almost impossible to leave listening to one of those debates without feeling like you learned something.
Okay, so what is the podcast again? Just
Intelligence Squared.
Okay, all right. So Intelligence Squared.
I was thinking it was
Squared
US.
Squared, but all right. So Seth, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. So
yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.
All right, I hope you have a lot of good debates in your future then.
Thank you.
All right, that is the show for the week. My name is Daniel Poppy. I'll see you next week, and this is How to Write Good.